The story we tell ourselves is simple. A fireball from space, a flash brighter than the sun, and in a single terrible moment, the age of dinosaurs ends. Before we continue, leave a like and subscribe, only if it truly feels natural. And now, softly, tell me, where are you listening from? It's a story that fits neatly into our imagination, clean, dramatic, and mercifully brief. A catastrophe you can point to. A cause you can circle on a diagram. A sky that betrayed the Earth. But 66 million years ago, the most terrifying betrayal didn't come from above. It came from below. Picture a valley at the edge of the late Cretaceous world. Not a battlefield, not a wasteland, a living place. Rivers, braided through soft floodplains. Towering conifers and cycads catching warm light. Ferns crowding the ground in endless green waves. This valley had fed generations of giants. It had watched herds pass through for thousands of seasons without ever changing its shape. A group of hadrosaurs grazes along the riverbank jaws, moving in steady, rhythmic confidence. A triceratops lowers its head horns, framing the water's reflection as it drinks. Farther back, half hidden by trees, a tyrannosaurus stands still, not hunting, not rushing, simply existing as apex predators often do. Nothing is wrong. There is no warning cry, no falling shadow, no sudden night. Then the ground trembles. Not violently, not enough to knock anyone over. It feels more like a deep breath taken by the earth itself. The sort of movement that animals notice before they understand. Heads lift, tails stiffen. Birds, primitive, unfamiliar shapes burst from the trees. The tremor passes. Silence returns. For a heartbeat, the valley believes it's over. But what just moved beneath their feet wasn't an earthquake in the way we imagine one. It wasn't local. It wasn't random. It was the echo of something far larger, shockwaves racing through the planet after the Chicxulub impact, traveling not through air, but through the very bones of the Earth. When an asteroid strikes with the force of billions of nuclear bombs, the planet doesn't just shake, it rings. Those vibrations wrap around the globe, converging, amplifying, and awakening stresses that have been locked in place for millions of years. Fault lines that haven't slipped since before dinosaurs existed begin to feel pressure they were never meant to hold. This valley sits above one of them. Another tremor follows, stronger this time. The ground ripples not like water, but like fabric pulled too tight. A hadrosaur stumbles. The river's surface shivers unnaturally, sending circular waves outward even though there is no wind. Then comes the sound. A low, tearing groan. Deep, continuous. Not an explosion, but a failure. The earth begins to split. A crack opens in the soil no wider than a claw at first. It snakes across the floodplain, racing faster than any animal can run. Trees tilt as their roots lose purchase. The crack widens, revealing darkness beneath, layers of sediment that have not seen light since long before this valley existed. The river reaches the fracture and vanishes. Not floods, not splashes. It simply pours into the opening, swallowed, as if the land has developed a throat. Panic finally erupts. The hadrosaurs bolt, their coordinated herd movement dissolving into chaos. One slips as the ground beneath it liquefies soil, losing its strength, behaving more like thick mud than earth. This phenomenon triggered by intense shaking turns once solid ground into a trap. Every step becomes heavier than the last. The crack widens into a rift. Meters across now, then tens. The sound grows louder, not sharper, but deeper, like the planet itself is groaning under the strain. Entire stands of trees slide sideways and vanish, roots and all, into the opening. A triceratops rears back hooves, scrambling horns, swinging at nothing. The ground beneath its massive weight collapses, and in seconds it is gone, not crushed, not burned, but erased from the surface of the world. The Tyrannosaurus turns. Not in rage, not in dominance, in confusion. It takes a step back, then another. The distance between it and the herd widens, not because it chooses to retreat, but because the land between them is no longer stable. A new fracture branches outward, cutting off escape routes that existed moments ago. This is not a predator failing. This is geography betraying everything equally. The rift continues to expand, driven by forces far below the surface. Tectonic plates shifting abruptly, crust collapsing into voids, opened by stress redistribution. The valley floor sinks in sections not uniformly, but in violent steps. Some areas drop meters at once, others tilt, funneling animals, trees, and sediment toward the growing abyss. Dust fills the air, not ash, not smoke. Pulverized earth, fine particles torn from the ground and thrown upward as entire sections collapse. Breathing becomes difficult. Vision shortens. Sound becomes muffled. Some dinosaurs never fall in. They are buried instead. As the valley sinks, slopes form where none existed. Landslides cascade inward, piling soil, plants, and bodies atop one another. Creatures caught at the margins are pinned, crushed not by impact, but by weight, thousands of tons of earth reclaiming its surface. There is no single moment of death here, no instant end, just acceleration, pressure, suffocation. And then as suddenly as it began, the motion slows. The rift stabilizes, not because the danger has passed, but because the Earth has finished releasing one of its failures. What remains is a scar, a collapsed basin where a thriving ecosystem stood minutes ago. The valley is gone, not scorched, not exploded, swallowed. Above it, the sky darkens. Not from this collapse alone, but from the global consequences already unfolding. Debris from the impact begins to fall back through the atmosphere. Fires ignite elsewhere. Tsunamis race across distant oceans. But here none of that matters anymore. Because for this valley, extinction didn't arrive riding fire. It arrived as gravity. And that is the first truth of 66 million years ago. The dinosaurs didn't all die because the sky fell. Some died because the ground beneath them, unchanging for lifetimes, decided without warning to open. And once the earth turns against you, there is no direction left to run. When the earth tore itself open, the first collapse was not the end, it was permission. Because once the earth tears itself open, it rarely stops at a single wound. What happened in that valley was not a freak accident isolated to one unlucky fault line. It was part of a planetary reaction, a chain response, set in motion the moment the Chicxulub impact punched energy into the Earth faster than the crust could absorb it. The planet didn't crack like glass. It behaved like something under tension for far too long, finally allowed to fail. The ground didn't just split. It began to unravel. The initial rift lengthened, racing outward through layers of sediment laid down over millions of years. Each meter it advanced exposed a history the dinosaurs had never known existed beneath them: ancient riverbeds, compacted mud, fossil soils from vanished climates. These layers were never meant to be seen. They were meant to stay buried, holding the surface together. As they were pulled apart, the valley lost its cohesion. Sections of land didn't fall straight down. They slid, tilted, rotated. Whole blocks of terrain shifted sideways as gravity searched for a new balance point and failed to find one. What had been flat grazing ground became a jagged moving surface where every step changed the terrain itself. For the animals still alive, this was incomprehensible. Instincts evolved to detect predator storms, seasonal floods, not the sudden betrayal of solid ground. The usual rules, run toward water, follow the herd, stay on high ground, contradicted each other now. Rivers vanished into fissures. High ground collapsed without warning. Herds fractured as escape routes closed in seconds. The earth was no longer a stage. It was an active participant. As the rift widened, the valley floor experienced liquefaction on a massive scale. Water trapped in sediment was violently shaken upward, turning soil into something that could no longer support weight. Animals didn't fall through holes, they sank. Legs plunged knee-deep, then hip-deep as each struggle made the ground weaker. The heavier the body, the faster it was claimed. A hadrosaur pulled free once, then twice, only to be dragged down by the weight of others colliding into it. A triceratops charged instinctively, muscles firing, horns low, only to find that strength meant nothing when the ground behaved like thick slurry. Its hooves churned, carving its own grave wider with every desperate movement. Predators fared no better. The Tyrannosaurus that turned moments earlier now found itself isolated on a shrinking island of stability. Each step sent fractures radiating outward. The ground ahead sloped toward the rift, a subtle angle at first, then steep enough that footing became impossible. Its tail swung for balance, claws dug into soil that refused to hold. This wasn't a hunt. This was an eviction. As blocks of land slid inward, the rift transformed into a collapsing basin. Trees toppled in slow motion, roots tearing free with sounds like splintering bone. Entire riverbanks sloughed off, pouring sediment and debris into the growing void. Animals caught on these slopes weren't thrown, they were carried, moving with the land as it betrayed them. Some died quickly, many did not. Burial came in waves. The first layer pinned limbs and bodies. The second cut off air. The third erased all remaining space. Fossils formed not from dramatic death poses, but from stillness animals frozen mid-step, mid-turn, mid-life. And still the earth was not finished. The stress didn't dissipate cleanly. It migrated. New fractures branched off the main rift, like lightning frozen in stone. Smaller sink zones opened beyond the valley, swallowing pockets of forest-cutting migration corridors that had existed for thousands of years. The ecosystem didn't just lose a location, it lost connectivity. Life depends on movement. The earth had just severed it. From above, if anyone could have watched, the destruction wouldn't look explosive, it would look surgical. A precise removal of a living system they cut out and dropped into the planet's interior. No firestorm, no crater rim, just absence where abundance had been. And then gradually motion slowed. Not because stability returned, but because collapse had run out of surface to consume. The valley floor settled into a new configuration, lower broken, layered with debris and bodies. Water pooled in some areas, drained entirely in others. What remained was unrecognizable. The landmarks that guided generations of animals were gone. The roots etched into instinct no longer existed. Above this ruined basin, dust hung in the air thick enough to mute sunlight. It wasn't yet the global darkness that would come later, but it was enough to change the mood of the world. Light dimmed. Temperatures shifted. The valley that once amplified life now absorbed it. And the survivors, those few that had not fallen, sunk, or been buried, stood at the margins of something they could not understand. They hadn't been outrun. They hadn't been outcompeted. They hadn't even been hunted. They had been displaced. This is the part of extinction we rarely picture. Not the kill, but the removal. Because ecosystems don't collapse only when organisms die. They collapse when the physical spaces that support them are destroyed. When feeding grounds vanish. When rivers no longer flow. When migration paths are cut into fragments. too small to sustain life. What happened here was not an ending in itself, it was a beginning. A rupture that would echo outward, weakening systems already under strain. From atmospheric chaos, cooling temperatures, and failing food chains. The Chicxulub impact may have struck the planet in a single place, but the Earth answered everywhere, and it answered by tearing itself open. By the time fire began to fall from the sky, by the time darkness spread across continents, this valley was already dead, not burned, not frozen, but erased from the surface of the world, claimed by a planet in the middle of redefining what habitable meant, and that raises a grim realization. If the Earth could do this to one valley, how many others followed? The valley that never screamed. When the motion finally stopped, there was no victory cry from the Earth, no final collapse, no echoing boom to mark the end. There was only silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong, not peaceful, not restful, but heavy, as if sound itself had been pressed flat beneath layers of stone. The valley that had once hummed with movement, with footsteps and calls and wind through leaves, no longer had the shape required to make noise. It hadn't screamed. It hadn't been given time to. What remained was not a battlefield. There were no scattered bones picked clean by scavengers, no signs of frantic last stands, no trails of escape carved into the soil. Instead, there was stillness. A triceratops lay on its side legs, folded beneath it, not twisted, not shattered, but pinned. The posture was wrong, not because of violence, but because motion had simply stopped. Its skull faced the slope it had tried to climb, horns angled upward as if frozen in a decision it never got to finish. Nearby, a cluster of hadrosaurs stood shoulder to shoulder, their bodies pressed together by the slow inward slide of sediment. They hadn't scattered. Herd instinct had pulled them closer, in the final moments not realizing that closeness only made burial faster. Their spines arched gently, ribs intact, tails overlapping. A family erased in formation. Trees still stood. That was the unsettling part. Trunks rose vertically from layers of collapsed earth roots, torn free but never uprooted violently enough to topple them. Leaves and branches were pressed into fine sediment outlines, preserved like shadows. This wasn't destruction by force, it was preservation by suffocation. The river that once braided through the valley was gone, but not absent. Its channel was still visible, abruptly ending at a wall of collapsed earth. Beneath that wall, water pooled briefly, then vanished into deeper fractures below. The river didn't overflow or flood. It simply ended. If this had been fire, there would be charcoal. If it had been impact, there would be shock fractures. If it had been predation, there would be bones out of place. Instead, paleontologists would one day find something far stranger. Order. Bodies preserved close to where they lived. Plant matter layered in natural orientation. Sediment arranged not by chaotic turbulence, but by gravity acting over minutes instead of seconds. This was not a moment of panic frozen in time like Pompeii. This was a place overtaken too quickly to resist, but too slowly to explode. A valley swallowed whole. In modern terms, what happened here resembles a rapid subsidence event, a collapse where the surface drops into voids, created by deep structural failure. But labels don't capture the experience of being inside it. To the animals living there, the valley didn't collapse. It softened. The ground lost its certainty. Weight pressed downward, and the earth answered by giving way not violently, but decisively. Every breath stirred dust. Every movement increased pressure. The more one struggled, the faster the sediment flowed around limbs and torsos. Many animals likely remained conscious until the end. not crushed, not burned, not torn apart, just unable to expand their lungs as the earth reclaimed the space their bodies occupied. This is why there are no signs of escape attempts etched into the rock, no claw marks clawing upward, no broken bones from thrashing. There was nowhere to thrash to, and when everything settled, the valley didn't look destroyed. It looked quiet. Above it, time continued. Ash and debris from distant fires would eventually fall. Acid rain would later seep into the upper layers. Temperatures would swing wildly as sunlight dimmed across the globe. But down here, those later catastrophes didn't matter. This place was already sealed. Layer by layer, sediment accumulated. What had once been surface became subsurface. Pressure mounted slowly, pressing bodies flatter, squeezing water out of tissues, locking outlines into stone. Scavengers never arrived. Decomposition halted prematurely, oxygen vanished. The valley became a tomb without a marker. And that is why millions of years later such sites confuse us. We expect extinction to look dramatic. We expect violence. We expect signs of chaos that match our stories. But this valley tells a different truth, one that's far more unsettling. Not all endings are loud. Some ecosystems don't die screaming or running or fighting. Some are erased so efficiently that life doesn't have time to react in recognizable ways. No warning cry spreads, no migration begins, no adaptation is attempted. One moment the valley exists, the next it is memory, and that silence, the absence of struggle, the lack of disorder is not evidence of peace. It is evidence of speed, of a threshold crossed so suddenly that instinct never had time to catch up. This is why the fossil record sometimes feels cruelly calm, because beneath that calm lies the aftermath of a world that never got the chance to understand what was happening to it. The dinosaurs in this valley didn't lose a battle. They didn't fail to adapt. They didn't even know they were in danger. They were simply removed from the surface of the earth, from the future, from the story, by a planet that had begun to change the rules everywhere at once. And while this valley lay sealed in darkness, the rest of the world was only just beginning to unravel. After the split, a world that couldn't heal. The valley was gone, but the damage did not stop with its disappearance. That is the mistake we often make when we imagine extinction. We picture a place destroyed, a population erased, and we assume the rest of the world continues more or less unchanged. But ecosystems are not isolated rooms. They are networks. When one node collapses, stress ripples outward, quietly at first, then all at once. The split in the earth did not merely remove a valley, it broke a system that could no longer repair itself. Before the collapse, this valley had been more than a home. It was a corridor, a refuge, a seasonal anchor point in a landscape shaped by movement. Herds passed through it during migrations. Rivers carried nutrients outward. Predators followed predictable routes because prey did. Life flowed through the valley like blood through an artery. When the ground opened and swallowed it, that artery was severed. The immediate survivors, those that stood just beyond the margins of collapse, did not celebrate their luck. They found themselves stranded at the edge of absence. Familiar landmarks were gone. The river they relied on no longer ran. The grazing grounds they returned to each season had vanished beneath layers of stone and silence. Instinct urged them forward, but forward no longer existed. Migration paths that had been encoded into nervous systems over thousands of generations ended abruptly in cliffs, fractured basins, and unstable slopes. Some herds turned back, colliding with others doing the same. Bottlenecks formed where none had existed before. Competition intensified not because resources had vanished everywhere, but because access to them had become unpredictable. And above all of this, the sky began to change. The Chicxulub impact had not finished delivering its consequences. Debris ejected into the upper atmosphere circled the planet, re-entering as superheated fragments that ignited wildfires on a continental scale. Soot and aerosols climbed high, spreading into a shroud that dimmed sunlight for months, possibly years. Temperatures dropped. Photosynthesis slowed. Plants that depended on consistent light withered first. Ferns and fast-growing opportunists surged briefly, then faltered as nutrient cycles broke down. The food web did not collapse evenly, it unraveled unevenly, strand by strand. Herbivores grew thin. Predators followed. For the dinosaurs already displaced by the loss of the valley, this was catastrophic. They were not just hungry, they were out of place. Their bodies were built for abundance, massive frames that required steady intake. A Tyrannosaurus could survive weeks without food, perhaps longer, but months. In a world where prey populations were already destabilized, even kings cannot eat memories. Water systems fared no better. Acid rain formed as sulfur and nitrogen compounds mixed with atmospheric moisture, altered soil chemistry, and poisoned freshwater sources. Rivers shifted course as landscapes settled and eroded. Lakes became hostile. Algal blooms spiked, then collapsed, stripping oxygen from the water. Aquatic life suffered. Semi-aquatic species lost breeding grounds. Amphibians already sensitive to environmental change vanished rapidly. Each loss tightened the vice on those above them in the food chain. This is where extinction reveals its true shape. Not a wall, a slope. Species didn't fall off it all at once. They slipped, stumbled, lost footing. Some survived longer than others, not because they were superior, but because they happened to be standing on slightly firmer ground when the descent began. The valley's disappearance accelerated that slope. It removed a stabilizer from an already stressed system. It created gaps in migration that could not be rerouted quickly enough. It forced animals into marginal habitats where competition was fiercer and resources thinner. And it did all of this while the planet's climate oscillated wildly, unable to settle into any recognizable pattern. Healing requires stability. The Earth provided none. In the past, mass extinctions had been followed by long recoveries, millions of years of slow adaptation and radiation. But those recoveries depended on something critical, a world that eventually stopped changing long enough for life to find new balances. This time the damage was layered. Geological upheaval, atmospheric collapse, climate shock, ecological fragmentation, each one alone might have been survivable. Together they formed a feedback loop that pushed systems past their limits. Dinosaurs did not fail because they were obsolete. They failed because the environment they were adapted to ceased to exist faster than evolution could respond. Even the survivors, those species that lingered into the early Paleogene, lived in a world stripped of its former richness. Smaller body sizes became advantageous. Burrowing, hiding, scavenging strategies, once secondary, became dominant. The Age of Giants quietly ended not with a roar, but with starvation, displacement, and reproductive failure. And still the Earth did not pause. Sediment continued to accumulate over the sunken valley. Pressure increased. Heat rose. What had once been flesh, leaf, and river slowly transformed into stone. The valley became part of the crust itself, a scar sealed beneath layers of time. Above it, new life would eventually appear. Mammals would diversify. Birds would take new forms. Forests would return, then retreat, then return again. To To those future inhabitants, the land would seem solid, trustworthy, permanent. They would not know what lay beneath their feet. That is the most unsettling legacy of this event. Not that the earth broke, but that it healed just enough to hide the wound. The planet did not remember the valley, but the absence it created reshaped everything that followed. And as we stand now, millions of years later, piecing together this story from fragments of bone and stone, one truth becomes clear. The extinction of the dinosaurs was not a single disaster. It was a process, a sequence of failures cascading through a world that could no longer support the forms of life it once nurtured. The split in the earth was not the end, but it ensured there would be no return to what had been. By the time the sky cleared and sunlight returned, the world that needed that valley was already gone, and no amount of time could bring it back. The lesson buried beneath the earth. 66 million years have passed since the earth split open and erased that valley. That is long enough for oceans to rearrange themselves, long enough for mountains to rise and grind back into dust, long enough for entirely new forms of life to inherit the surface and mistake stability for permanence. Today, if you stood above that ancient scar, you wouldn't see anything remarkable. No chasm, no warning sign, just land quiet, solid, dependable. Perhaps a forest, perhaps a city, perhaps a road cutting cleanly through rock that once flowed like liquid beneath the feet of dinosaurs. That is the final deception of deep time. The earth heals just enough to be trusted again. We tend to imagine extinction as a failure of organisms, a story where animals are too slow, too specialized, too inflexible to survive change. But the buried valley tells a different story, one that is far more uncomfortable, because nothing in that ecosystem failed first. The plants were growing, the rivers were flowing, the herds were moving, predators were hunting successfully, life was working. What failed was the assumption that the ground itself was reliable. The dinosaurs of that valley did not lose a race against evolution. They were not outcompeted by superior forms. They were not wiped out because they lacked intelligence, adaptability, or resilience. They were erased because the system they depended on, the physical architecture of the planet, crossed a threshold without warning. And thresholds are merciless. Up to a certain point, stress accumulates invisibly. Faults lock. Pressures build. Ecosystems adjust, adapt, absorb. Everything looks stable right up until the moment it isn't. Then change arrives. Not as a gradual curve, but as a step function, a sudden drop into a new reality where old rules no longer apply. The valley collapse was one such step. It reminds us that extinction does not require a single cause. It requires convergence. The Chicxulub impact did not act alone. Climate instability did not act alone. Geological weakness did not act alone. But together they formed a cascade, each amplifying the others until survival became mathematically improbable, not biologically impossible. This distinction matters because it reframes extinction not as a punishment but as an outcome, not as failure but as consequence. The earth is not cruel, it is indifferent. It does not weigh the value of species. It does not care how long something has survived or how dominant it once was. It responds to energy pressure imbalance. When thresholds are crossed, it changes state and life must follow or be left behind. The dinosaurs were not defeated by a single blow from the sky. They were outpaced by the speed at which their world unraveled. Some died instantly, some starved slowly. Some were buried where they stood, never knowing the rules had changed. And yet there is something profoundly important hidden in that loss. Because extinction did not end life, it redirected it. From the wreckage of collapsed valleys and darkened skies came new opportunities, smaller bodies, faster reproduction, burrowing behaviors, flexibility over strength. Mammals that once lived in the margins began to explore spaces left vacant. Birds descendants of dinosaurs themselves adapted, diversified, and learned to navigate a changed planet. The Earth did not reset. It reorganized. And that is the deeper lesson buried beneath the valley. Not that life is fragile, but that it is conditional. It thrives not because the planet protects it, but because it can exploit brief windows of stability between upheavals. Those windows feel permanent when you live inside them, until they close. Today we walk on crust that still carries ancient scars. We build cities on fault lines. We extract energy from systems formed by long-buried catastrophes. We study extinction as if it were a story that ended rather than a process that pauses. The valley reminds us that no ecosystem is guaranteed tomorrow simply because it functioned yesterday. And that understanding should not inspire despair. It should inspire humility. Because the dinosaurs did not lose their world through ignorance or arrogance. They lost it because they lived during a moment when the Earth changed faster than biology could follow. Their bones, sealed beneath layers of stone, are not warnings carved in anger. They are records. Records of what happens when stability is assumed instead of questioned. When resilience is measured only in strength, not in flexibility. When survival depends on systems too large to control. The ground beneath that valley split open once. It will split again somewhere someday. Not because the Earth is hostile, but because change is its natural state. And the final truth, the one written deepest beneath the stone, is this: extinction is not the opposite of life. It is part of its rhythm. The dinosaurs were not erased because they failed. They were erased because the planet moved on. Thanks for watching, and until next time on Dino Saga TV, don't forget to subscribe so we can share many more stories together.